Okay, so I don't know, do the microphones work? Maybe not. I'm going to bet you'll be able to hear me even with the mask. Good evening. So we are calling to order this meeting of the Curriculum and Instruction Subcommittee. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Chairperson Martin,
Here.
Ms. Del Rossi,
Here.
Ms. Thompson. Two present, one absent.
And Ms. Thompson is on her way, so hopefully she'll get here, hopefully soon. So we did have two topics we were going to be talking about tonight. I don't know if there's a particular order you'd prefer to go in based on who's here. That would be great. So a curriculum update from the Fine Arts Department. Yeah, if you could use the podium, I'm assuming that that's kind of how they're taping it, but we'll find out.
So we submitted to you a memo that talks about the adoption of a wellness curriculum, which we're already actually teaching at Lowell High School, but this wellness curriculum would include the performing arts. So the performing arts, which already count for the physical education credit in classes like dance, marching band, and also show choir, would also count for the health requirement at Lowell High School. So the overarching view is that teaching health and wellness through the lens of the performing arts creates a robust way for students to access the health curriculum through firsthand lived experiences in the arts. In the performing arts, maintaining personal health goes beyond musculoskeletal and physiological health, including whether or not someone is free from disease, free from injury, and has enough stamina, strength, and control. But health in the performing arts also necessarily includes an understanding of proper sleep, hydration, nutrition, movement, self-care, mental health, and sexual personal health and wellness. By learning the health curriculum through the lens of the performing arts, students will have a more well-rounded educational experience in both of those content areas. Teachers and department leaders at Lowell High School feel confident that students can meet the standards for health education through the implementation of a wellness curriculum in the performing arts. I know that there were some questions around the sex ed components, which is standard 4 in the Mass frameworks. And Stephanie Silvaggio is here, the science department chair, to talk about a longstanding partnership Lowell High School has with an organization called Teen Block. And we've invited them to collaborate with us, and Teen Block is willing to come in and work with our teachers, not only to create, but deliver the curriculum around those sensitive types of health topics that the performing arts teachers may not be prepared to deliver on their own. And she can answer some questions about what Teen Block is willing to offer, what their curriculum looks like, and how that can overlap with the curriculum and content that we're already teaching in the performing arts.
Great.
So Teen Block is part of the Lowell Community Health Center, and they have a whole curriculum already mapped out. They work anywhere from coming in to deliver 1 or 2 lessons to the entire curriculum. When I approached Monica with the idea of working with our fine arts teachers, she said we're more than willing to work with them and map out a curriculum that works for them to cover the topics needed.
So how would you envision that kind of happening? Because we'll be looking to implement this for next school year?
For next school year.
Okay.
So we're hoping on some of the early release days, they can work together to develop the curriculum.
Okay.
And then next year, they would come into school. They would set up a schedule with the teachers to deliver the curriculum around specifically the sex ed topics that the fine arts teachers didn't feel they were quite prepared to teach.
I just have a question in regards to how much this would cost the school district to have them come in and to teach when we already have health.
At this point, Teen Block is grant funded, so it would cost the school nothing.
What type of fund?
Teen Block is grant funded, to deliver this type of programming, so it would not cost us anything.
Okay. So basically, you'd be taking the curriculum benchmarks, the standards from the state. They'd be working to develop the curriculum in concert with your teachers and then going from there.
Yes.
Do you have a sense of what the kind of bandwidth that our fine arts teachers would have? I mean, and this is just strictly in terms of time. So they're taking, if they're going to be with the presenters, which I'm assuming they would be.
Yes.
Part of that whole thing. How is that going to kind of be balanced out with the duties they already have?
So they're already incorporating numerous projects in their performing arts curriculum. So they met already throughout this school year to work on developing a sort of model curriculum, a sample curriculum document. It was developed mostly by the dance teachers in collaboration with a couple of the health teachers. And so they were looking at ways that they could tailor those projects toward meeting the health standards rather than being projects that are solely focused on the arts.
Okay.
So it's not going to, it's not anything that's going to negatively impact the students' ability to successfully learn what they need to in their dance classes or their marching band or show choir classes. They're still going to learn all of that content. They're just going to learn some additional content about health and wellness as it relates to the arts.
Beautiful. Thank you both. I'm sorry. We
Absolutely.
just started a little bit ago. So talking about the sex ed components of the fine arts curriculum, so you know it's Lowell Community Health Center, so you may not want to vote on it. Just vote present or, okay. So I'm sorry, you're just busting in. I'm sorry to both of you, but welcome to, any questions? Yes, Mr. Dakota.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that most of our performing groups have additional time after school that they work with our kids, so whatever would be lost during the day would be easily made up after school. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to go forward with this, and I'm saying again, as I said a few weeks ago, that it's a long time coming, and I'm so grateful that it's finally going to happen. Thank you.
And to really just point out that it does feel, from our perspective and from the perspective of the teachers, like a mutually beneficial initiative, because the health classes are some of the classes that have the highest enrollment.
Yeah.
And so to reduce the number of seats in those classes will actually allow the students to have a better experience. The students who stay in the traditional health classes will have a lower student-to-teacher ratio. So they'll be delivered the content in a way that can better meet their needs.
And also in a very real-world relevant way of delivering the health and wellness curriculum. It's an integral part of the fine arts curriculum and the dance especially, so.
Yeah, you can certainly see that. Okay. Either of you ladies have any questions?
I guess I'm wondering how much direct conversation is there? I mean, and because I'm late, I apologize. It was an accident. But we're both on the other. We're on the other side of the bridge, and you know how that is. But how much direct
He wants to talk.
sex ed will be a component of? So is there like a ratio?
I don't know if there's specifically a ratio. It is a part of the health curriculum. And as we said before you entered, Teen Block is very expert at delivering this curriculum to other schools. They've done this around the area. We have not used them specifically at the high school level because we have the health teachers. I believe some in the middle schools may have used them. And we're really just continuing what might have been done at the middle schools. But the Teen Block personnel will have direct contact with our students, but the fine arts teachers will be there as well. So they'll all be working together to support the students in learning this, talking about it, incorporating it, and whatnot into the curriculum.
Ms. Doherty? Any questions?
Again, I apologize that I wasn't here for the presentation part. Are we going to get a breakdown in terms of what the components of the sexual education programming will be? Preventative, pregnancy, all those?
All of those, and they're outlined in the map that Jessica provided to you, and it follows the Mass frameworks. as they're written now. They have not been updated recently.
Okay.
But we're also happy to share, as the teachers work on those professional development days with Team Block, we're happy to share the work that comes out of those meetings. So if you wanted to see an actual curriculum document, like this is just bullet points, but if you wanted to see the actual built out units of study, we're happy to share that with you when that time comes.
Great. Yes, Mr. Dakota?
Thank you, Ms. Bond. Is the health requirement just one school year currently for kids to take one school year? And if a student is taking 4 years of dance, they'll get 4 years of health?
Right, they'll actually get more help. Well, it would be offered in the dance like class, in a class like dance and dance 1 and 2.
Dance 1 and 2.
However, in a class like band, marching band, and show choir, they will actually get that health component every single year. So they'll actually get more health instruction because we're going to build it into the class, which is an all levels class. So for those content areas, yes, it would be more exposure to the health content.
I like it even more and more when we talk about it.
So to that point, if they're in it for 4 years, is it the same content for the 4 years, or is it going to be added, will there be additional?
Yeah, we worked
Okay.
to ensure that it was somewhat different content, so we were looking at ways to make this really lived practice sort of curriculum, so that the students they'd be learning the content, but they'd also be writing maybe response essays or reflections or working on projects or looking at ways in which they can actually live the health curriculum rather than it being more like a textbook study.
Okay, I believe we have a member of the public who wanted to speak. If you ladies can have a seat. Nope, if you go over to the podium, I think we need to,
This is being taped.
yeah, it is, that's what they told me. And broadcast live, so.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. Tim Heitzman, recently resigned teacher from Lowell High School who taught for 27 years. Some of you, I had sent a letter petitioning to be able to speak to the school committee about why somebody was leaving with still 5 years before pension. I get the impression this is not really that.
No, this is
Okay.
about.
Though
the
there is
topic
an
on the agenda.
overlap, why I'm here. First, I'd like to say, I think some of you guys are familiar with Michael Ortiz, the city lawyer. I'm going to say something. If you've ever listened to him, Mike would talk to us every year at the start of the year. And he would always say, Andy, you might remember, if this was your child, what would you do? I was watching the school committee last week. And when at the end of this thing, I saw that they were going to give,
Can I ask, is there a button to turn that on?
I don't know, I've never used one.
Yeah, look on the,
Here?
it is on?
Oh, it looks
Okay.
like it's on.
Okay.
Would you like, if I take this?
Sorry, said he can hear it now.
Okay.
Okay. Mike used to always say to us, every year, if this was your child, would you want this done? If they were going to just add and do some health stuff sprinkled into band, show choir, dance, no problem. But when I heard that they're actually going to give them Health A and Health B credit, these are 2 semester courses that run for 90 days, 5 days a week. If this was my child, knowing what we do in our health classes, and I had Eileen, I don't know if she passed out some of the comments from some of my past students. There is absolutely no way I would want my child taken out of the in-depth class that we teach to go into a class where they're going to put in and do things here and there. Teen Block. Teen Block was coming to our school and doing health stuff for 2 or 3 weeks. When Ms. Salvaggio took over as department head, they stopped coming in. I was actually given the Adult of the Year award from Teen Block because of some of my students who would go to Teen Block. I have this, I think, the introduction page. And I read through it. It says, in order to better align the Lowell High School graduation requirements for the forthcoming revised Massachusetts Comprehensive Health Framework, which places a greater emphasis on health as a form of personal wellness. If the department heads for health and science and fine arts had come down and sat with us as a group, they would know we're already doing an extremely comprehensive wellness. It's called health, but it's a wellness program. In freshman health, the start of it is wellness, mental, physical, social, to let them know that your health is more than just the physical. That's the beginning of health ed, is to let them know this is really a wellness course. So I saw that if they came in and they sat down and talked with us, you know, no disrespect to Ms. Savaggio, but in the 4 years that she's been our department head, it's really been more of a science department head, and very rarely sitting down with the health teachers when we would go off after half days and having conversations with us. Because if she had sat down, in the early 2000s, we were the health department of the year in the state of Massachusetts. We have been running a comprehensive program. We've been running comprehensive sex ed, from STDs, consensual, healthy relationships, birth control, abstinence, you name it, it was being covered. And it's still being covered. So to take them out, so it's like, so I read that first part, it says, in order to better, that's almost insinuating that what I've done for the last 27 years was not adequate. And if you read some of the things from my students, you can hear that my students were adequately being taken care of on how to be the best versions of themselves mentally, physically, and socially. It goes on to say, as such, it mentions the dance, band, show choir could be taken to meet this requirement. I'm going to go back to address that. It then says, this change provides a benefit to all affected academic departments. It's not talking about students, it's talking about helping these departments. Providing opportunities for increased in fine arts enrollment, again, trying to help a department. Program retention while decreasing oversubscribed health classes. I've been there 27 years. Class size has always been discussed. It's never really been addressed. I know I've never personally complained about class size. I'll take 40 kids. I don't care. And most of the teachers feel the same way. They'd like smaller, but that is by no means something that's pressing on their desires to have that fixed more than anything else. And then it says, additionally, these changes mark Lowell High School's first step in revisiting graduation requirements and efforts, and here's the point, improve our Mass Core graduation completion rates. One of the reasons I've quit Lowell High School is because they have been doing credit grabs and anything they can do to lower standards academically and behaviorally to up graduation rates. This to me is just nothing but a credit grab. And again, I have no problem if they want to do things here and there in fine arts and stuff like that, and you do something on that, that's great. But to think you're going to take them out of a class that meets every day and gets, I have the thing here with the list of the curriculum and what it'll be. Communication, nutrition, stress, sex ed, social health, healthy relationships. Communication, when I taught in health aid, that was 2 weeks, at least 5 days a week, 10 classes. To do it in depth and do role playing and have group discussions and have projects. Nutrition, that's 10 classes to do that in depth. Stress and stress management, again, I don't see how they could do this in justice by throwing it in every now and then. I just don't understand it. 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, a major component of the Health B credit. I started the class teaching this stuff from the original book from the father before this book was even written. I started to make up my own notes. Then this book came along and we got it, and I had other teachers were doing it. This is about 6 weeks in detail because it covers all aspects of your beingness. From relationship, it gets it. You can use this to help you with violence. I had a kid years ago, and we were not discussing gangs. started to talk about getting out of the gang because while he was doing the value aspect of this, and one of his values was love, and I walked by him and I said, how does being in a gang go with that value? I've had people try to girls get out of abusive relationships when they're seeing that one of their values is self-respect, and then they're sitting there looking at this contradiction. This, again, is 4 to 6 weeks in the Health B, and we're going to take and throw some of this stuff into the dance. I love dance. I love music. I love art. My kids do. But again, if this was my child, and I know what goes into the health program, you know, all I could say, imagine the roles were reversed, and I'm the health teacher, and now you tell me that I'm going to have to be teaching some music, some singing within the context of my health curriculum. Is that going to be 5 or 10 minutes every day? Is that 1 or 2 classes every week that I'm going to take out to do it? And if I do, how much of this did I have to sacrifice? And also, how good did I probably really do teaching you how to play the flute or sing? Something's going to suffer. And what suffers in reality is both of them will. But here's the problem. You guys are talking about taking this stuff. I can't imagine the dance teachers, the show choir teachers, the band teachers, whose that's their passion, are going to be fully committed to teaching something that isn't, you know, we're all wired differently. They went into dance and show choir and band because that's what they absolutely love. And now you're going to sit and give out some worksheets? Because I honestly don't know what it would be. Administrators, Stephanie and one of the administrators last summer came up with a health program for incoming 9th graders to take in the summer. It was a 6-week program. That class replaced their Health A requirement. I had a student last year, a 9th grader, phenomenal kid. He was my lifesaver because his camera was on all the time during Zoom. At the end of the course, and he was a Latin Lyceum kid, phenomenal student, phenomenal kid. And at the end, the last day, we're just talking on the camera, and he says, oh, I'm all done with my health credits now. I was like, no, you have to take Health A still. He goes, no, I got the summer program. It was a 6-week program. He said I finished it in a week. That is by no means going into the depth. It was probably, and I talked to the teacher who taught it. They got a science teacher that taught it. They didn't even go and find a health teacher to do it. They had one of the science teachers. I talked to him and I asked, he goes, I didn't teach anything. I just handed out worksheets and collected them. And I'm afraid that's what will happen if we end up switching and putting a health credit into those classes. Again, to have classes do stuff here and there. And they say they're teaching this now. I actually had one of the health teachers reach out to me today. And she said she asked one of her students who's in show choir, so are you guys doing health stuff? They go, yeah, we do breathing exercises, and every now and then they ask us how we're feeling. And again, that's great. That does not replace weeks on nutrition, vaping, opioids, being an advocate for yourself when you go to the doctor, and all the other stuff that we get into in a class that is really comprehensive and in detail. So if this was my child, I would think it would be a huge mistake to take them away from that class to give them credit for these 2 classes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions or? Yes, Mr. Dakota.
Just statement, and a question, actually, not for you, Tim. The Junior ROTC program has been satisfying these requirements for a very, very long time. And I would like to know how they present their health component in their program, which is quite similar in terms of how much time on their particular subject matter, in their case, ROTC, and I'd like to hear what the differences are and how they approach it, because it's been acceptable for a very, very long time for ROTC, and I want to know why it wouldn't be acceptable for our performing arts students. Thank you.
Would anyone be able to speak to the ROTC program, or no? Well, I don't,
When I came in starting to teach there, that was already in place. So I never really looked into it, I'm new at the school, that was just the way it was.
okay.
To think they're making this switch now, though, to these other classes, and possibly doing this, I know the ROTC teachers have never come in and sat with the health teachers to ask what we're doing, they're never collaborated with us.
So we're going to have an opportunity as we go forward to kind of be part of this process. So in this subcommittee, I think will be kind of the key place for that to happen. So as we're looking at the work with Team Block, with the work with the teachers, developing curriculum, developing how it will be implemented in a way that we can ensure kind of the comprehensive nature of what I think we're looking to ensure we have, looping in ROTC so that we can see what they're doing and what we might want to replicate in that. What I'd probably say, and Ms. Desmond, I'd look at you, would it make sense to reconvene in 4 weeks, 6 weeks? You could let us know when you think, when there's a natural point where you'd want to be able to update the curriculum subcommittee so we can kind of take everything into account and ensure that we're hitting everything that we want to. Okay, so if you could let us know that, we'll go from there. Yes, Jackie.
Thank you, and I really just, I guess, have a comment and a question. I felt when this decision came down, it was rather rushed. So I guess I had concerns right out of the gate, as I know a number of my colleagues did, about the sex education piece, about this idea of trying to be everything to everyone, and that both sides are going to lose out from that. So I still have that concern, and I guess my question is, are we fully committed to eliminating health and doing this, or are we still open to making sure that it is the best decision for our kids?
Well, I mean,
And I guess just to even kind of coincide with that, my assumption, and maybe I was incorrect in this assumption, was that this change or this compilation would be for the students who were going to do band and show choir, but there would still be a standalone curriculum of health for the rest of the population. Okay.
that's what it is. It would just be for those students that are involved in dance and those. Well, I mean, I would say we're looking to get more information, but again, this is something that doesn't get implemented until next school year. So we've got this whole second semester in the summer that this will be being worked on. Would we be, what I'd recommend is that we kind of authorize the department to move forward, to start gathering this information, and then they can report back with a more kind of comprehensive sense of how they'll be ensuring that we are able to hit all the topics and the depth of content that we want to have. So maybe we should kind of look at it at like a 6-week number. So maybe if we move forward with that, we submit this as a report of progress, and then the full committee can actually take action that would only put us like in March, so that'd certainly be enough time. Yes.
Thank you. Just a follow-up to that, and I know we talked about it on the floor to Ms. Desmond, to also look into this idea of multi-season athletes being able to opt out of physical education as a requirement. I know many districts across the state have been doing that for a while. I think it does, similar to what and I know this is the intention with the fine arts piece, free up kids who are already spending a good bit of time participating in sports after school to be able to take an elective, something that's going to be of interest and engaging, where they're getting the physical education component by the sports activity. So I would also, while we're doing this research, to explore that as well. That would be of interest to me. Thank you.
Well, I will say also, I know that our colleague, Mr. Ferreira, is interested in that as well. as a representative from Lowell High School. So, I mean, I think if it is something we could kind of add in without it being too onerous, I'm usually a fan of go one at a time, but if you wouldn't mind, that would be great information to get. Okay, any other questions, concerns on this topic? Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for presenting. I'd take a motion from Mr. Dakota to accept this as a report of progress. Oh, who's on it? You can't. Yeah, you can't. So, Eileen, if you could make that motion?
I'd like to make a motion of a report of progress.
I will second that. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Excellent. We can move on to our next topic. Sorry about that. It'll be
Bring your
two,
March 7th.
yeah, in that area at least. We'll confirm that. Okay. Yep. Okay, so our next topic is the update from special education on the LeBlanc School.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm here tonight in response to the January 19th school committee meeting and the discussion around the LeBlanc School. So hoping to be able to answer some questions, engage in a fruitful discussion, and share out some information so that we can, make an informed decision in regards to how best service our students. I do want to take a moment to just acknowledge that we have some of the staff from the LeBlanc School here, and I appreciate their commitment to the work that they do for the students. I think it's a testament that they really care about the kids in the building, so thank you for that. So where I'll start is the information that was shared with you folks on the 19th. I had prepared a table of a 5-year breakdown of staffing for the school. For the most part, over the course of that time, there wasn't a lot of change. A lot of it was pretty consistent. Obviously, relevant to this conversation was the changes around the BCBA position. So in the last 2 school years, we've had the BCBA position to support some of our other schools. So in the 2020-2021 school year, for the first half of the school year, our BCBA was supporting both the LeBlanc School and the Laura Lee Therapeutic Day School. In January, with some staffing changes, there was a transition from the Laura Lee as the secondary support over to Lowell High School so that the BCBA was supporting LeBlanc and supporting Lowell High School. That's carried into the 21-22 school year, where the supports have been offered between those 2 buildings. Now, given the nature of this year, all of our staff across the district have had to step outside of their roles in a variety of different ways, right, to address our current climate and needs. So all of our BCBAs have stepped outside of their traditional caseloads to offer supports, be it because of absences, be it because of staffing changes. We had a maternity leave in our BCBA cohort. So the BCBA that has been supporting, LeBlanc and Lowell High School has also been supporting the Shaughnessy School from November until just recently. That's no longer in place. In addition to picking up some other cases along the way with the rest of the cohort, okay? So beyond that, I wanted to get into some specifics about the cohort in general. So we have 10 BCBAs in district, all right? The BCBAs traditionally work in teams of 2. So they have a collection of schools that they support. The exceptions to that are the BCBA at the Laura Lee School. So the BCBA there is supporting the Laura Lee School, part-time at Lowell High School, and part-time in the Wang Middle School adjustment classrooms. The LeBlanc is working between the LeBlanc and Lowell High School. And then we have 2 BCBAs that support the 80-day school. So when the 80-day school was opened and the design of the school was developed, 2 BCBA positions were built into the program in order to be able to address the needs and meet the requirements for that population. So outside of those immediate people, we have 3 additional teams of BCBAs. So my first team They have a caseload of 183 students spread out over 7 schools. I have another team that has a caseload of approximately 157 students. They go to 7 schools. And then a third team, their caseload right now is 154 students, and they go to 5 schools. Now, the variance in schools is because we do have some smaller schools and we have some larger schools. But that's how we spread it out, and their primary role is to support the substantially separate programs. So students in the adjustment program, students that are in the CSA programs, students are in the LEAP programs. So from kindergarten through 8th grade, across the city, we have 59 substantially separate classrooms. At Lowell High School, we have 15 substantially separate classrooms. So the need and the work that they do is substantial. It's great. Their caseloads are high. The work that they do is very specialized and very specific. They're covering a lot of ground. So as I think about the whole district, as a director of special education, and I think about the needs of all of my kids, I have to make sure in my role that I factor in everything that would have been considered prior to me coming in and moving forward about how to address the needs of the kids. I certainly will not sit here and suggest that the needs are not great for a population of students like we have at the LeBlanc School. As many of you know, I served as the coordinator of the Lower Lee Therapeutic Day School for a couple of school years, and a lot of the students at the LeBlanc School, those are my kids. I know them well. Prior to that, I was an adjustment teacher at Lowell High School for 10 years. I've got a strong background in this work. I've been doing it, the host of my career. I did a lot of my doctoral research along this, and there's a lot of components that go into the work. Being in my first year as the director of special education, I'm continuously learning about everything that Lowell has to offer. For as many years as I've been here, I'm still continuously learning about everything that's happening, including learning about the LeBlanc. They've had a very consistent staff for a very long time. But I feel like, regardless of this particular circumstance, I have a lot of questions and things to learn about the LeBlanc School, about their programming, about the way that they're supported, about what their connections are to the high school, about how they handle their scheduling and ensuring that their kids are getting the appropriate credits, about making sure that they're getting all of the same opportunities that are offered to everybody else. Because we want to make sure that they're getting the best education possible over there. So there's a variety of things that factor into what could be made available that would be impactful to a program like the LeBlanc. Now, specific to this particular circumstance with the BCBA, with the information that was presented on January 19th, it would be totally remiss of me to stand here and say that I don't think that we need to offer them support. We certainly need to offer them support. Everybody has a right to go to school, to feel safe. That includes staff, that includes students, and we want to maximize their potential in the classroom. So I think that we need to take a close look at what we can put into place to ensure that we can support them, while also being mindful of the impact across the district, being mindful of the needs of all of our programming, and also take into consideration all the facets that go into the development, the management, the work that's behind a therapeutic day school, and how we can best maximize everybody's potential in that building. So I welcome any questions that you have, that I can offer to you guys tonight from my experience and my knowledge about the LeBlanc School as I continue to learn as well.
Thank you. So looking at the subcommittee I'm sorry?
I'm wondering if we could hear from the speakers and then develop some questions from.
Oh, okay.
that.
Okay, we can do that
But
first.
I'm
Fine
just
with me.
suggesting that.
Yep. Thank you. If you'd like to have a seat, so we have staff who'd like to present.
Thank you so much, it's me again.
Thank you so much.
Just one second for point of clarity. Is this at a closed circuit television or are we live as far as?
I believe it's live. They told me that it was being broadcast live as well as taped for
I
future.
just want to make sure if I share students, I don't want to share any personal details.
Nothing. Yeah, no names, no.
Identifiable things, so
Yep.
I'll keep it a little bit.
I'm not going to be talking about any students at all.
Okay, I had planned to, so.
So, one of the reasons why I came back is after I spoke on Wednesday, Dr. Boyd said something that upset me. It was not his intention to upset. I know that, but it upset me, and I almost came running back to the mic. He said, if we start pulling people from other schools, there'll be a ripple effect. And I wanted to scream, where was the concern of the ripple effect when you pulled someone from our school? Because that's what's happened. We're literally in the middle of a ripple effect that I am really concerned is going to be a tsunami. Because if kids start moving out of districts, and I hate to equate, it's obscene really to equate children with money. If they move out of district, it costs the district a lot of money. So that's why we're back here. How the program works is we have a BCBA, we also have a social worker. We have 40 kids. Each of them, when they come into our school, is assigned their point person. It might be the BCBA, it might be the social worker. Karen, or Garabedian, who's our BCBA, she handles the kids with emotional disabilities, kids who have been hospitalized, medicated, really behavioral issues, sometimes very volatile, and Mr. Durkin will speak about that. So both of these two professionals, they're the ones that are in charge of teaching these kids their coping skills, what to do when they feel bubbling up inside kind of thing. When one of them is missing, they can't go to the other one. Not that they can't, they won't, because they build a relationship with that person. It would be like if your therapist wasn't in, you're not going to go to somebody else. So if one student is bubbling and will say to me, I need to see Mrs. Garabedian, she's not here today. So we do our best, and I think we're really good, and you know, we know their coping skills, but sometimes it's just, we can't, you know. So that's how the school works. You remove one of those people, a ripple happens, and we're getting into tsunami weather, and so something has to be done immediately. Yes, he's right. Frank was right. There is a ripple effect. We're stretched thin. But it's not that I think the LeBlanc is more important. We're not more important, of course not. But whenever there's a student in another building that can't be handled, they funnel down to us. And if we don't have proper staffing, it becomes a holding cell. We become literally a holding cell. And we're happy that to accommodate the other schools, we remove the kids for them, but we can't provide effective therapeutic care, or as effective. And Jack's going to address what's been going, the ripple effect. He deals with the ripple.
Thank you very much for inviting us to speak here. First of all, it's kind of impressive that you guys want to hear from us as teachers at the face-to-face level when you guys are usually more in the 50,000-foot view. So I very much do appreciate having the opportunity to speak for you guys tonight. When Sharon asked me to come down, I did not see the last meeting, but I certainly miss having Karen Garabedian around. I certainly wanted to speak on her behalf. One of the things that I do is being on the sport team. Ideally, I'm teaching history and teaching physical education, occasionally helping out here and there and whatever other things we need done. But when we have crisis, as so many of our kids have, it requires people who can deal with that crisis in a way that minimizes harm and maximizes like just respecting the kid who's acting out's personhood. And that's a very important thing to do. And it's funny looking at a giant has-been athlete, you probably are like, oh, I'm the most important person on the crisis team. Our big guys are not our most important people. The most important people are the clinical people who can actually take the kids, absorb them into their office. I don't have to do a hold or I don't have to do talking down when I have somebody who is not only a BCBA but is also trained at a clinical level to be able to have that amazing dual capacity to bring that kid down. It also frees me up to work with another kid who might be in this situation, because unfortunately problems don't typically happen in isolation. It's usually one starts and one starts, one starts. So we're looking at a very large equation. And I hate to say it, but in my 10 years at the LeBlanc, this has been by far and away the most difficult year. I mean, I've sustained a concussion, a couple lacerations, a couple bruises, and I don't hold any grudges against the kids. They're going through a lot. A lot of everyone, all the kids are. With COVID-19, it's definitely increased the level of mental health of everybody. But our kids were already at that level, and it's taken it up a little bit. And we're seeing it, and it can become kind of dangerous. So having somebody like Karen Garabedian around, it makes a huge, huge difference. Because I'll give you one example. I won't mention the student's name. But this particular student came into my classroom very upset, swearing. He's, bigger kid, definitely alpha kid, and not doing anything. And he's like, "Can I go to Miss G's?" Well, it was one of the J's we did not have Miss G. So unfortunately, she's not here. Do you want to try? And I tried a couple other things. He was upset with me because I was trying to make him do work. And I'm like, "We can try and do it." It's like, no. And then he throws a chair, storms out of the classroom. Now, that gets into escalating to needing to call the support team in that situation, because now the school's unsafe because he's going around. But he did try to access his support that we had. I wrote into his IEP because it works. It wasn't specifically Karen Garabedian, but this kid trusts very few people. And she's one who has, ultimately, it's not that she's a BCBA or she's a clinician, it's that she's Karen Garabedian, and that matters. So we didn't have that there that day. That ended up resulted in a couple assaults. Our security guard got hit in the head. I get mildly concussed, a bit. And that didn't need to occur had we had we been able to have Karen Garabedian support that kid. I was woefully inadequate at that point. We certainly try to de-escalate things verbally and try to de-escalate things as best we can, but sometimes we're not the right person for the job. Clearly wasn't that day. Student went out, fortunately didn't end up going out in cuffs, but it resulted in something that didn't necessarily, it might have went another way had it. Another example with the same student, we had a problem at her Christmas party. It was fine, it was excellent, best Christmas party I'd ever seen until it wasn't. And then we have several kids going around. This kid is one of the kids that's, most physical in school. We get him off into Miss Garabedian's office. He's calming down. I get another kid off into another office. They're calming down. The other kids, we were able to de-escalate 4 kids who were very amped up with absolutely no injury whatsoever, no need for any major holds, no need for any calls and stuff like that. It's tough because it's just she's a very integral part of our behavior support system. And I know the district has needs. I mean, my wife is also a BCBA and works in Chelmsford, and they're struggling there too, and with the different behaviors they're seeing out of kids that aren't even on special education radar. And it's just it is dire out there, but it's just for all it is elsewhere, it's ramped up more in our in what we do as well too. And I just really think, I personally want to provide the best services that we can to kids, and dealing with the crisis is much better when you have the people staffing there all of the time that we can take them off and get them to stop it before it gets a crisis. So that way you never have to have the security card call. I don't have to open a classroom and, be some big man that might have looked like, their mom's boyfriend was a real jerk to them or something. So it's just like where they are in that emotional state, if we can get them before they get that emotional state, now they're cool with me, I'm their teacher, I'm not representing somebody else in their mind. Now they're able to deal with the problems and the emotions that they're working out and struggling to articulate, so they act out. And a lot of these stressors are just like, it's getting tougher and tougher on the kids. I am so glad to be back in person because they needed it. And it is tough to see some of the things that, it's hard for me to be on a team because I have a lot of respect for my team. We're an amazing group of people. I mean, it's a very high burnout job, and this is my 17th year doing it, my 10th year in Lowell. And I absolutely love the LeBlanc. And it's a family-like atmosphere. It's one of the things our job can be very, very difficult, and it can also be exceptionally rewarding. But I think the thing that's rewarding is when we get to do our best and we get to see a kid go on to get a job somewhere and graduate who statistically would have been unlikely to do so. So that kind of thing makes me feel really good, and that's what I want to do. I love it. But I don't feel like without having Karen Garabedian in there, I'm able to do that as much because it's not me, it's us. And she's a big part of us, and we still have her. I'm not saying we don't to something, but it's just like the times that we need her and it's just like, and she's not there, I can feel a huge loss. And it's so much of what you do de-escalating a crisis has nothing to do with your ability to perform a CPI hold. It's more specifically in how you can de-escalate the kid, and she's the best at it. So that's kind of really why I wanted to come here today. I don't know if any of you folks have any questions or if there's anything you wanted me to go more on, or.
I don't know if there are any.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
for your time.
We appreciate your time. So I have a few, did you have more, Frank? Okay, I had some questions, but you can go finish your presentation.
No, by all means,
Okay.
I'm here to answer your questions.
Okay. So looking at the subcommittee first, if you have any specific questions for,
Not as of yet, I'm kind of compiling.
Okay.
Yeah, same, just thinking, I guess.
okay. Go right ahead, Ms. Doherty. I'll wait.
Thank you. So I guess my question is, we have all recognized the last 2 years have been unprecedented in the amount of anxiety in our families, our students, and our staff. And I believe this committee has tried to open up some doors for bringing more staff into the district, a number of social workers, and I know it's been challenging to find staff. So my question to you is, have we been looking for BCBAs? Because I would say, aside from the needs at the LeBlanc as our therapeutic school, and that a BCBA who has 180 students across 7 schools is someone spread beyond, I would think, efficacy at that point. That's a huge caseload in 7 schools. So have we been looking for BCBAs? Have we been able to bring any more on? And I don't know if is that an HR question, or would you have been involved in that?
So I can tell you that we're always analyzing our needs. I know that we've put in a lot of work this year to bring in some social workers. We've been working on building in our paraprofessional staff to build out our staffing needs. And it has been very difficult to find staffing. I do think that it's important for me to note, specific to the LeBlanc School, relevant to this conversation, is one of the things, as I'm thinking through all of these different needs, I also have to consider the attendance of the school and the attendance of all the schools. And while the LeBlanc does have 41 students currently on roster, they just had one that joined them, the attendance has been significantly impacted. Some of it is COVID. Some of it is COVID related. But oftentimes, their attendance has been as low as 50% in the building. And that's something that I think about, again, as I think about the generalized needs of the building, and also when I think about the programming and level of support. And are there additional things that I haven't seen yet, that I haven't thought about, that could be available to support the program? How do we help the kids with the generalization of skills, for example? You know, I hear a lot about, and I've spoken and I've been colleagues with Ms. Cuneo for a long time, and the things about like the point person system and the efficacy of the point person system. I also want to make sure that we're working to generalize the skills of the kids, and so that they're responsive to a whole group of people, to everybody in the building. And again, that's where I think about programmatically, is there anything else that I'm missing as the director? So to your question, we definitely have been looking at a variety of different ways to analyze and think about how we can support the programs. Specific to the BCBAs, the supports that we've been looking at the district level, we've been looking at paraprofessionals and social workers. But I think that I would have to defer to Dr. Hall, unless you have any other information, Ms. Desmond, specific to that role. Yep. And that's the other thing that's very important with regards to the BCBA. So it's a board-certified behavior analyst, okay? So what they do is largely around task analysis work. So to be able to look at student behavior and try to identify antecedents that impact the behavior, and then think about solutions related to the behavior. So they do a lot of task analysis, breaking down data, graphing, looking for trends to be able to then inform staff about what they're seeing and working with them and coaching them about building out their skills so that they can take a comprehensive approach in their classroom and work on that generalization of skills, all right? And it's a really important thing that they do when they get into their task analysis, when they get into discrete trials, when they get into things like VB mapping, which is a type of assessment that BCBAs are specifically trained in. When they do something like the ABLES that the BCBAs are specifically trained in, there's very structured work that they do to be able to equip the staff around them to build out their skill set and best understand the behaviors of their students so that they can take that work and apply it to what's happening in the classroom. So that's largely centered around the work that they do. It's not the role of a social worker. It's different than a classroom teacher or an other related service provider. And I think that one of the things that's really important to think about when it comes to, our BCBAs, I had made a note about functional behavioral assessments, which is one of the many assessments and work that they do. So in the FBAs right now, they've got, across the city, we have 21 active functional behavioral assessments. We've got 30 general education consults where they're going in supporting students that are not on IEPs. And they've completed up to this point about 25 other FBAs. So when you think about an FBA, functional behavioral assessment, you're looking at a minimum of 10 days of data collection, 10 school days. You're looking at some staff interviews. You're looking at a period of data analysis and graphing, all prior to writing the actual functional behavioral assessment itself. And to write a quality functional behavioral assessment, you're looking at a minimum of probably about 3 to 3.5 hours of work. So it's a comprehensive process that we go through, that each of them go through when they write their FBAs in support of their students. There's a lot of work that's involved in what they do to support our kids. Sure.
Yes, Mr. Rossi.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the work that you've put in.
Thank you.
You guys for all the work you guys do. I'm just curious as to whether or not the services on the grids, if there's a BCBA consult or BCBA time, if that time is justified for a BCBA to be in the building at the LeBlanc. You know what I'm saying? If it's on a consult grid, the B grid, the C grid, is that justified as per the IEP at this point?
Sure, so it's hard to answer the justification, but to answer your question, right? So most of our BCBAs, when they're serviced through an IEP, they're often serviced as a consult. They do a lot of direct service to the programs. I mentioned all the different sub-separate classrooms that they do, okay? If we have something like social skills groups, those are typically a C-grid service that's managed by a social worker.
Sorry, I just have another question. Is there a social worker currently at the LeBlanc?
There is. There is. So the services through the C-grid for something like a social skills group would be traditionally managed by a social worker. That's largely connected to the work that they do and their specific training. So oftentimes, when we have our BCBAs, every IEP is obviously individualized, and there are direct service components, and there are times when you'll see a C-grid service, which is a direct pull-out service that's tied to a BCBA just as much as you would see anybody else. Oftentimes, it's less direct service and more consultation and working, and there's a lot of coaching that's involved, in addition to all the task analysis work that they're doing.
I just have a quick question, and just for clarity's sake, because this is a bit of a new world, though I do know about IEPs a bit.
Sure.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the BCBAs really equip the social workers to conduct case management, and then they equip the classroom teachers to do classroom management and behavioral mitigation?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I was just trying to, so in the question that Ms. Del Rossi just asked, what you're saying is that a lot of their work or a lot of their time is really going towards the conversation or the consultation with the social worker in order to equip the school.
Yeah, what they're doing is they're working to provide information to their colleagues, multidisciplinary colleagues, and then be able to support them in taking that information and apply it to the work. They're really building out the skills of the people that are around them. So if I can cite an example, I know you have a question. So I thought about myself as a classroom teacher for a long time. You know, working as a classroom teacher, what was really important to me, especially working in this population, is doing everything I could to make sure that the students were most responsive to me. It was wonderful that they were respectful if we had administration and other people came into the room, but I was always looking to build up my own skill set so that they were most responsive to me and so that I can make sure that I maximize my time there. You know, that's an important staple for being a teacher, and the role of something like the BCBA is really integral in helping our staff to be able to build up their skill set in that regard.
So I guess in my special ed head, I just want to clarify that most of the BCBA services are within the A-grade consultation on the IEPs at the LeBlanc.
So I can't speak specific to the LeBlanc. I don't have the LeBlanc IEPs in front of me, but typically that is the case across the board with the practices for our BCBAs.
Mr. Dakota?
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Is the staffing that really is required to fulfill all of our students' IEPs and 504s, are we able to fulfill all of our legal requirements on that? That's a concern for me. I think from our point of view as to are we in compliance, or are we kind of in compliance, or are we not in compliance?
Are you talking building specific?
Building
I just want to clear that I'm.
Building specific.
Yeah. So
Then if you want, you can go beyond that and talk about the whole city.
So the reason why I'm asking that is because, again, that's something that we're constantly analyzing. I'm very cognizant and mindful of what the regs do say. I will tell you that if I look at my substantially separate classrooms outside of the LeBlanc, many of those classrooms are up around 11 or 12 students. So according to the regs, up to 12 students, I can have a teacher and a paraprofessional, and we are meeting our obligations there, okay? You know, when we go through and we look at some of our more specialized populations, like our students with autism, Oftentimes in those programs, we have an increase in our paraprofessionals, and we work to make sure that we meet all of the regulations with regards to that. So at this time, I do believe that we're meeting our legal obligation. I'm always looking at the model, always thinking about what we can do to best service our kids, and always wanting to advocate to make sure that we're working to meet all the needs of our kids on all of our schools.
I had a couple quick questions, if I could. So first off, kind of trying to understand the role of the BCBA. As we talk about kind of the caseloads that they're carrying, is that an accurate number? I mean, is that, if they're really working with teachers and with social workers, are they truly managing a caseload? Is it the same 150 kids that they're consulting or testing over the course of the year?
So the students that are on their caseload, many of them are in the sub-separate programs, and so they're going in and they're doing their consultative work with those students, and they're in and out of those classrooms, again, doing the analysis work so that they can inform the staff there of what they're doing. You know, oftentimes they're working with the principals in the school on students that are not even special ed students, to offer their expertise and consultation to be able to work with staff to best address the needs of the kids as a proactive measure, and also just to address the needs of our schools. You know, I mean, they're all our kids, right? So they're constantly doing that work. But each of them have a group of schools. Those schools all have dedicated sub-separate programs, and they're in and out of those programs. They're meeting with those teachers daily, oftentimes multiple times daily. They have established schedules that they go into, and then in addition to that, if there's a specific need, they'll go outside of their schedule to go to a building to address those immediate needs. As I mentioned earlier, you know, given the nature of this year, they've helped out with a lot of different things this year to ensure that the schools are properly supported.
Is there a professional standard in terms of caseload? I know for most of our positions, like guidance counselors and social workers, there's a professional standard of how big their caseload should be.
Sure. That's a difficult question to answer because the licensure that BCBAs have is not necessarily specific to an educational model. It's specific to a clinical model. So there is some variance with regards to that, right? So when they go through their analysis, or they go through their analysis training, and then they go through all of the testing and everything, it's pretty comprehensive, the level of education that they have to go through. Then they have a book of standards that they follow and a governing board that they consult with to make sure that the work they're doing is aligned with what those expectations are.
So no.
I'm sorry?
So no, there's no set.
So I
caseload
guess that
like
I'm not, I don't know that I can fully speak to the answer of what exactly that number is.
Okay.
I know that they go through that process, but I'm not sure that I can speak to at this point. I'm happy to get that information for you, but I don't know that
I
can
would be
speak to it
curious to have a
Sure.
little better understanding of the actual kind of certification. and
Absolutely.
Licensure.
now. Absolutely, I'd be
Um,
happy to get that for you.
Thank you. So I guess what I'd like to kind of do to bring this home is, it's my understanding, and I'd like you to just kind of confirm or deny. It's my understanding that this current year at the LeBlanc has been substantially different than prior years. Pandemic, there's a lot that's going on. But am I right in my understanding that the way that LeBlanc is functioning right now is substantially different than it was even last year? In terms of the incidents, in terms of the inappropriate outbursts from students. It seems to me that it's functioning in a different way last year than it is this year. Is that accurate?
So I would say that all of our schools are definitely seeing something that's unique this year.
Yep.
It's a unique year, first and foremost. I think that, some of the numbers of the incidents and things they have this year, there's been an uptick in some of those behaviors that's been consistent with what we've been seeing across the city. Make no mistake about it. This is a very unique population that has very specific and important needs. And it's that way with the LeBlanc School. The students of the Laura Lee School are of a similar nature. So, the needs of them are definitely very unique. And I think that what we've seen is reflective of the challenges that we're seeing across the city.
And I'm not surprised by that answer. I mean, obviously, district-wide, nationwide, things are much.
Absolutely.
It's a different dynamic at play. I guess my other question would kind of focus on your attendance reference. So is the kind of 50% attendance, again, is that an anomaly this year, or was that always the case? Yes. An anomaly this year? Okay. Okay.
So-
Because, I mean, my question would be, and I'm sorry to jump, but my question would be, if I'm looking at a school and it's got a 50% attendance rate, COVID obviously has its own, brand of hell that it brings with it. But it tells me my first instinct would be, we need more. We need more at that school, not less. It's not that, we only have 50% showing up so we can afford to move a teacher out or move a BCBA out or move any kind of support out. To me, it says you need to double down on that school to make sure you're getting those kids back in as quickly as you can.
Yep.
So I have that question as to the kind of district approach of looking at a reduced attendance rate and answering it with pulling out that BCBA resource and assigning it someplace else.
Sure. So if I may, when I look at our attendance data and I look at the information from the state level, there's two specific data points that I've looked at: the chronic absentee rate and then the COVID absentee rate. The COVID absentee rate is something that we now have available. So this year at LeBlanc School, the COVID absentee rate, and this is not unique to just the chronic kids, it's for the whole building. The COVID absentee rate for the school is currently 28%. So just so that you have that point of reference. Now, when looking at their attendance and thinking about the year, because as I said to everybody, I want to make sure that I'm very thoughtful and thorough in thinking about my position as a whole. So in September, there was an average attendance there of roughly 19 students. And one other point of reference, so they have 41 students currently. They started the year with 34. So there's always some fluctuation, just so that the committee has a full understanding of that as students come and go. In October, the average attendance was 18. In November, it was 19. December, it was 20. And so far this month in January, they've had an average of 19 students at present. So there is a significant attendance issue. It is impactful, and it's something that I'm being mindful as I'm thinking about looking at this globally about the best way to support the building.
Are there any
Yes.
plans in place? I'm sorry.
I have a
Go
question.
ahead.
Thank you. This is not a slam on you or anything like that. I disagree with playing the whole numbers game, because I've always been involved with particular issues with that, having to deal with, well, you've only got this many kids, so you can't offer that class. And I think we are at the point with the LeBlanc School that where else are these kids going to go? And we need to make sure that we have this available to us in this district, because there's a great need for it. Now, whether the attendance is off because of whatever, I don't think that should sway the number of people that we need to be properly staffed in that building. That's at the end of the day, that's what I believe we should be looking at. And I know it makes your job even more difficult to try to fulfill all those needs. And I get it, you have a whole district to be considering, not just one school. But at the end of the day, those kids that are going to the LeBlanc School, there's nowhere else for them to go. And we have to offer them the best that we can, the best that's available, end of story. I think that's really where we're at. I think we need to keep that prize in mind and make sure that we have enough staff to cover that need. Because again, if the staff is starting to feel unsafe when they've never felt unsafe, those are issues in terms of not just having the proper therapists involved and so forth, but resource officers hello, can we talk? We haven't even approached that part of the equation of resource officers. And you had, originally, they had a dedicated resource officer at that building, which I thought was an absolute need, but because of other budget cuts in other areas in the city, we're down to what? How many total, do you know, Ms. Desmond, how many resources officers are we still at 3 or 4? We're at 5. Ooh, we're at 5. We're talking 29 schools. 29 schools and 5 resource officers. I'm speechless with that. Thank you.
Could, Ms. Thompson had a quick question, and then,
So I just have a quick question, I guess somewhat rhetorical, so I'm not really expecting you to necessarily answer, but I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to, can we fulfill the mission of that school? And I think that that's something that Mr. Dakota was kind of alluding to. And for me, I think this also boils down to a matter of equity. And I know when people hear equity, they think of like moving the numbers around for fairness. That's equality, right? Equity is making sure that the people that need the most get the most. And I think in this case, albeit, I think, initially when you hear it, and I think Ms. Martin alluded to this, you hear, that there's 50%, well then, shimmy the resources around. And I get that, even logically, sometimes I get that. But when you're in a situation where you're working with people young people and adults who are needing the supports to give to the most needed group that you work with the population. I think we really have to consider, can we fulfill the mission to this school in the way that we're currently doing and conducting business? I think that's just something that I want to put out there.
I think that's a great point and a great question.
I just wanted to add, and I want to thank Mr. Dakota for his comments, because, thanks. It didn't matter to me the day a student approached me and pushed me up to the whiteboard, and thank God Jack came in. It wouldn't have mattered if it was 40 kids and there were 20. It was unsafe. Okay? I've worked at that school, I don't know, 12 years, okay? And my own children who are grown say, Mom, why are you working at that school? Because they get nervous, okay? And I always would laugh. I'm nervous. I know most teachers always have eyes behind back of their head like parents. I'm like an owl. I was afraid. I was afraid, Frank. I really was. This boy came up to me, and I knew in an instant he was going to hurt me, and this man came in.
So I don't
Yeah,
want
no,
to give
no,
any,
I know you do. I know you do.
I don't want to give any suggestion. I think one of the first things I said, I want to go back to something that I said in the start. Okay, by all means, everybody has a right to feel safe, right? They are all students and staff. That's of utmost importance. Okay, and I also I want to address 2 points of questions that were here. First of all, Mr. Dakota, I don't intend to just purely play the numbers game. I've been doing this work with this population for a very long time. I feel that in my role, it's important for me to consider all factors. And I think that one of the things that's important for me to consider is the universal needs of the program and the building and the resources that we have, and have we explored all of the resources that could potentially support the program, all right? Because I don't know that this is just about having one specific staff member or one specific position to support the universal needs of those kids. There's a lot of things that go into this work. It's very comprehensive work, right? Something that I'm pretty passionate about, something that I've done for a really long time. And as I said, the kids at LeBlanc were my kids. Many of those kids came from my school over at the Lower Lee. And so I have a really strong investment in their success. To the question that you had in regards to the attendance, it's an important matter. It's something that I'm working to offer support and feedback and thoughtfulness to the building, to the staff, to the leadership. But at the end of the day, when I think about like how best to respond at this point, what I do think is that we definitely owe the building a response. We definitely need to make sure that the building is safe. We definitely need to make sure that the people in the building feel safe. And I think that there's a lot of information to be gathered. So I would think that a response such as placing a highly qualified staff member there for a period of time, full-time, definitively there, to offer their supports and establish a system to really dig deep into the many supports that we can make available to the LeBlanc school, making sure that we're fully exercising everything that we could offer to them. Everything. Safety is of the utmost importance. I want to know more about their academics. I want to know more about the many opportunities that could be made available to them. I went to the LeBlanc today. I walked through the school today, touched base with Ms. Cuneo, got to see some of my old students, and there was a bus that was pulling up at noontime, and Ms. Cuneo said to me, well, I have some kids that are going to go to a job now. That's fantastic. It's fantastic that they're taking an opportunity like that. So I want to continue to know more about what they're doing, and I want to be able to engage in conversations with her and talk about some of the things that I know that I did, in addition to some of the many, many supports that exist. This is a great city. We have a lot of things here, okay? And it's a very multifaceted level of work that goes into this type of education for these kids. And I want to make sure that I don't leave any stone unturned when I think about how are we best addressing their needs and making sure that they get everything they're entitled to, everything that FAPE says they should get, and making sure that we're holding ourselves to the highest standard to ensure that.
Any other? Mr. Dakota?
I just want to say that I have the utmost confidence that you will pursue this with a vengeance and come up with some kind of a solution for us and for the LeBlanc as well. I have the confidence in you that you will be able to do this.
Thank you.
It won't be easy, but I have confidence in you, so thank you.
Thank you.
And I just to wrap up, would just want to add, so and I appreciate needing to take, to really get the comprehensive information. I think that's at the center of what you need to do all day, every day. So absolutely. I will say that, again, I've been here for a while too, so I've heard, over the course of years, and I can kind of tell the difference, I think. I haven't heard this before from the LeBlanc. So this is new. This isn't, sometimes there's, a certain kind of vibe in a building or a certain kind of response to things. The LeBlanc has not been a very reactive school. To me, this is a markedly different circumstance than they've been in before. And I do think it warrants a markedly different response. So I would say, as you're going through this process, I know that it's been a week, since we last spoke. So not looking for the comprehensive plan tonight. But I do think it's something that we should be looking at in the near term, in a matter of, days, weeks, as opposed to months, years. And I think it would be really helpful for this committee to be involved in that and learn and knowing that response. Because again, I think, part of our job is to bring the problems up, but the other part is to be able to talk about and celebrate when we solve problems, which does happen sometimes.
Sure.
So if we could maybe look at, again, we're going to be meeting again in a month, 6 weeks. I think it would be great to get a follow-up report and, to staff too. I know these are open meetings. We'd love to have you come back and let us know. Yes, Ms. Doherty.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand. We're not waiting a month to make any kind of impact. Okay.
No.
Because I do look at it, and I understand we have staffing concerns across the district. We have mental health needs across the district, social emotional concerns. But I look at the LeBlanc as like the emergency room, right? That's where the most critical kids are. That's why they're there, because they can't function in our typical classrooms and be successful. So it's like when you go into the ER and you're having a heart attack or you're bleeding, you get the attention and that's what I want to make sure that we're providing the supports, as I think was an excellent question Ms. Thompson asked, that supports the mission of the school. Because it is our last school. If they can't make it there, they're out of district. And that's not what we want for our children, our families. And it's going to have a severe ripple effect on our budget as well. But that's where that urgency comes for me. And I don't know if anybody here can tell us, if we have 5 school resource officers, who determines the deployment? Because they had a regular resource officer who visited the school, had those so very important relationships with the kids. So does, Ms. Desmond, do you know what happens? Like, who decides where the resource officers go? They don't all stay at the high school all the time. Because I think that's another resource for you, to have it's a daily thing or a couple of times a day, however, but to get the LeBlanc back on that roster, because I think that they do, a really good resource officer does so much for this, developing those relationships with our kids and providing that kind of sense of security for the staff. I mean, there's just a lot of, we've got 5, let's make sure they're, going back to the LeBlanc if they've stopped doing
Sure. So if I can contribute, I do know, in talking to Sergeant Joe Kelly, that there is at least one SRO that is not solely seated at the high school. So Sergeant Kelly did inform me that there is an officer who does do visits to schools. I did make sure that the building leadership is aware of that. That's something that I was recently apprised of. And then in addition to that, I also, just thinking about resources, I had a great conversation with Sergeant Cullen. He was talking about a program out of UTEC that's really targeting a lot of the students that meet the profile of our LeBlanc students. And again, I shared the information with the school because I'd like to be able to identify if there are some specific students that might fit programs like that, that we can offer this comprehensive package of services and supports to these kids. I really like that level of networking and partnership. That stuff is just vital to the long-term growth of all of these kids, right? And again, thinking about like the generalization of skills and the many things that we want them to be able to do so that they can have a safe experience at LeBlanc and that we can make sure that they can branch out and grow.
Any other questions before we? Yes.
I'm wondering if we, aside from the LeBlanc issue, Mr. Heisman stated he wanted to talk to us about some grading concerns, and is it too late to do that but I thought under curriculum update, it might be important to hear from him.
It's not on the agenda, so what I would say is that the curriculum committee will be reconvening soon, so we can look at the topic and get it on. Does that make sense? Because we don't really have a high school anymore, right? Okay. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn by Ms. Thompson, seconded by Ms. Del Rios. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for coming out tonight.
You just gave me a new last name, Ms.
Oh,
Del
did I?
Rios.
Oh, my God.
I kind of like it.
I did. I'm so sorry.
Del Rios.